Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the very warm welcome. It's the first time I get a standing ovation even before I speak. So, thank you. I feel no pressure. But nevertheless, just to say that good morning, everyone. I am extremely delighted to be here with you this morning to share my thoughts and perspectives on the topic. And I must commend TTN for putting this together. I believe that this topic is timely, it's apt, and it's crucial as we think about educating our learners for the 21st century. This gathering is not just another conference. It is a powerful reminder that the future of Nigeria rests not just in our policies, our politics, but really it rests in our classrooms. All too often, when we think about the nation and we think about the youth, we're quick to speak about perhaps the deficiencies in policies, the lack of government intervention, the economic situation, the resources. But I dare say that the power lies in our hands as educators, and the future of the children lies in what we do with our learners in our classrooms every day. You know, when we talk about education 2030, in my mind, we're asking something deeply important. And I'll just like to ask you, today I'll be asking a lot of questions for you to reflect on. And my first question is, what kind of Nigeria are we building? And how must we prepare our young people to thrive in it? Let me begin with something a bit personal. I went to school here in Nigeria, primary, secondary, university, qualified as a chartered accountant. When I was in school, the classroom was about one voice, the teacher's voice. You listened, you copied, you memorized, and then you hoped to pass. And I did pass. But I often felt that while I was complying, I was not truly learning. Indeed, I don't say it with any pride, but when I was in university, I really didn't feel that there was any need to go to the classrooms. Because I thought, you know what, this is a book. They're going to ask us to read it anyhow, memorize it, and we just have to. So I didn't see any value in going into the classroom. But I also remember my years in school about feeling unseen. Like I was learning in a system that didn't quite understand how I learned. I was privileged to come from a family where my parents had been educators in their young age and placed a lot of value on reading and books. And in those days, we didn't have the digital copy. We had the paper encyclopedias, all the children's encyclopedias, all of that. And I would immerse myself in hours reading any and everything. And that was the way I learned. I had a curious mind. I was always asking why, but that had no place in the classroom of my day. There was little space for that kind of questioning. The system was not designed for wonder. It was designed for obedience. Many times, I read, as I said, to pass, not fully understanding the concepts, but knowing that I just had to attain a certain proficiency in order to pass. And I would look around, on some occasions, several occasions, I just sort of knew, okay, there are 6 questions. If I read these 4 topics, I'm sure I will pass. And I just ignored the rest. And yeah, I did pass. But I continued with life. And after a few years, I went to business school. And then 2 magnificent things happened. 1, I finally learned. 2, I didn't feel unseen. My voice mattered. And my opinion mattered. My questions were debated, and answers were preferred. Not only from the teacher, but from my classmates. Why? Because of the pedagogy used in teaching. A form of experiential learning was what was used, the case study method, in which we were called upon to reflect. And I think that was a crucial element that was missing in all the years that I went through school and passed. That's reflection. What am I learning? Why am I learning this? What is the practical implication of what it is? And that changed everything. I learned deeply. And from this experience, I realized that education, when done right, it's not about performance. It is about participation. And I wonder, how many children in Nigeria today are still stuck in that my first kind of classroom? Going through the motions, but not ignited. Passing the exams, but not learning. Learning by rote, but not inspired. I believe that as we think about the leaders of this nation, we owe them more. That experience also taught me something endearing. That learning isn't just about tools or content. It is about people. It is about connection. It is about the power and importance of the human elements in education. And this will shape the thoughts that I share today about the challenges, the opportunities, and the trends in the future of education. But for us to start to prefer what it is that we can do, solutions to the challenges and what we can do as educators, let's pause for a moment and be honest about where we are today. While we have made strides, the educational sector is currently navigating a complex landscape that's characterized by both significant potential and considerable challenges. Many years ago, when I was a few years ago, when I was dean of the business school, perhaps about a decade ago, then we had started to, I think it was just the beginnings of what I call a technological revolution in education. We knew that there were tools that were being designed. We knew about the massive online open courses in which people would create courses and put on the internet that others could ascribe to or subscribe to, but we didn't quite know how it was going to change education. But in my view, we were sort of flirting with it. We knew we had to get on board. We didn't know how, but even then, we knew we had to learn something. And then we knew that we had to use tools to teach the students. But even then, I'm not sure that it came with some reflection as to exactly how the students would learn using those tools. And then COVID happened, and all of us were propelled into the adoption of technology at an accelerated pace. But then what happened was that people were delivering the content the same way that they delivered in a physical classroom. Were people learning? No. Were students passing? Yes. But as educators, we need to reflect. What is our role? And what is our desire for the learners who come into our classrooms? Are we there to just say, let's impact the knowledge? Or are we interested that these people must learn, not only for today, but to be able to be 21st century leaders, they must be able to continue learning. And we must give them the tools that they can use in a world that increasingly sees rapid advancements in several ways. If they learn tools and concepts for today, but they do not learn about the wider applicability of those or how to think critically for the future, we have failed as educators. Our education system, like many around the world, faces a multitude of challenges. You're well familiar with all of those. You know, I don't know whether, like me, you always pause or you sometimes pause and wonder. We're a nation full of bright, creative, and capable people. But why is it that I continue hearing many of these people are not equipped to meet the future? We can't compete. We say that there's, this high rates of unemployment. Employers on the other side say to me, we can't find people to employ. And I think, well, we have all these unemployed graduates. They've gone through school. They've come out with first classes. They've come out with second class uppers. They've come out with good degrees. How can you tell me you can't find people? Because increasingly, the world of work is not looking for people that have just the content. They're looking for people who can think critically. They're looking for people who can communicate. They're looking for people that have soft skills such as empathy. Can we learn those from machines? I don't know. Now, of course, the challenges that we face are myriad. Currently, we have 18.3 million Nigerian children out of school. 60% of these children are girls. 74% of children 7 to 14 cannot read or do basic math. Many schools lack basic infrastructure. No libraries, no labs, no computers, no access to internet, no technological tools. I broaden the scope of this because I do believe Lagos can sometimes be a bit deceptive. We may think that this is a universe of the world of children and learners in Nigeria, but it is not. We have the advantage that perhaps, being the commercial nerve center, some of this are widely available, but it's not true for the rest of the country. So when we talk about the tools of technology, we need to also think about scalability. When we think about preparing the 21st century leaders, we're not thinking about only the children who are growing up in Lagos and go to school in Lagos. We're thinking about the nation. And then I dare say that many teachers have not received training in digital school tools or even updated pedagogy. And I see it every day. We employ people, they come in, it's still the sage method of teaching. Obey. I've said it to you, give it to me. No room for reflection, no room for critical thinking. And therefore, we have learners, and let's keep in mind that not all learners in primary school will progress to secondary school, will progress to universities. But at every stage, we must be preparing the people to work in a fast-changing world. Many people who leave primary, secondary, even university are not prepared for the demands of a digital and a fast-changing world. And then we can layer on top of all of that all the challenges that we face, peculiarities of us in Nigeria, the insecurity in many regions, the social-cultural altitudes that deprioritize girls' education. 60% are out of school. We must be thinking about how, all the strengths we're thinking, it must be inclusive. Urban, rural, male, female, in order for us to ensure that Nigeria remains globally competitive and that we can continue to do things that improve the social and economic life of the nation. The picture is sobering. And, but we must not stop at diagnosis. We must also imagine what is possible. The challenges that we face today, to my mind, serve both as a stark reminder of the work that needs to be done, but it also highlights the fertile ground that exists for innovation and transformation as we look towards 2030. So when I talk about 2030, education 2020, we must confront these gaps honestly, but we must also be driven by possibility. What's possible? Today, we have access to tools that our predecessors as teachers and educators never even dreamt about. Even if we taught technology, we didn't think about generative AI. We can reimagine education, not just to tweak it, but to transform it. Artificial intelligence and data analytics can help us to identify learning gaps early and tailor interventions. And Dr. Wani spoke about the ways in which this can be deployed. Mobile technology and radio can bring education to even the most remote communities. At the university, we have a center that's focused on micro, small, and medium enterprises. And they hope to impart entrepreneurial skills to people across these communities, both in urban and in rural areas. The vast majority live in rural areas, don't speak in English. They have been able to take their learning, and through radio, people gather around. It's interesting to see. People gather around a radio and listen to things being taught to them. By use of tablets that are in the community, people can go there and access learning for those who are literate. But because when we think about inclusivity and the digital world, we don't want to exacerbate the divide. We really want people to learn using this technology. And therefore, across the 6 geopolitical zones, this learning is transmitted in their languages, just so that they can learn. Augmented reality, virtual reality, can make abstract subjects tangible, immersive, and memorable. I'm not going to delve deeper into that because I know that our guest speaker is an expert in technology, has developed a number of software apps, and will speak about this more competently than I could. But I just mentioned this in the context of what it is that we're discussing. But then, as teachers, one of the things that I mentioned earlier on was that for some of us, we have not been trained in using digital tools or in, adapting our pedagogy to be able to do that. I always believe that each professional has to take charge of their own learning. Because the learning that you achieve on your own, it remains with you. Sometimes I ask people, when was the last time you embarked on a course? They haven't sent me on training. And I said, well, that learning increases your intellectual capital, increases your assets and your value, and you walk away with it. So why don't you invest in it? Now, there are open online resources that democratize learning, not only for students, but also for us, the teachers. They're available online, giving access to world-class materials regardless of geography. And then also, there are collaboration platforms. One of the things that we seek to do at the business school is to expose people to how do you function, especially in these days of Japa. If you migrate to another country, and even if you don't, there are multinational companies and organizations that operate here. Are you, versed in, cultural norms, ethics? How do you deal with people from different communities? Now, the best way for them to achieve that is by immersive experience. Send them to go somewhere, and then let them immerse themselves there and experience all of this to learn. But how possible is that? That every learner can be transported to a different place to learn from their counterparts in other parts of the world. How many can go to that? So therefore, online collaboration platforms present us with the opportunities to connect classrooms across countries, allowing students to learn from and with others from around the world. But here's the catch. Technology is not magic. Whenever people talk about how, technology is going to replace workers, how, we don't need this, and I always say to them, you know what? Computers don't run companies, people do. And it's the same with us. We can use this, but the human element in educating is still of critical importance. That's the power of educators. That's the power of the human elements. And this is what AI cannot replicate. With all the things that artificial intelligence can do, your intuition, your empathy, your understanding of context is important to ensuring that our learners are not left behind. An example comes to mind. I once came across a teacher who worked in a public school, and we got talking. And she said she taught, I don't know the name of the subject, but it was computer literacy. And I was asking, how many computers do you have? She says, none. I said, so how do you teach? She said, well, what she's trying to do, I paraphrase, was to ensure that her students were digitally literate. And therefore, she built a cardboard computer lab. The children learned every part of a computer from cardboard cutouts. They memorized the keyboard layouts. They practiced typing with their fingers on air. And when eventually real laptops arrived, the students were ready. They didn't need to be taught how to open an app, where to find the space bar. Their minds had already made that leap. That, my dear friends, is what commitment looks like. That is a human element at work. So, as educators, what can we do? What kind of teacher do we need for the future? In my view, we need educators that see ourselves as facilitators, not as instructors. And there's a difference. There is a difference. When you instruct, it's do this, do that, follow this, learn it. There are things that we need to memorize. Your multiplication tables. They're just things that, we need, because these are the basic tools that, we need to offer to our learners. But our role goes beyond that. And it calls for reflection. In my role as a teacher, as an educator, what do I bring to the classroom? Is it just instruction? Or I help the people to learn and I facilitate this learning? Which means fostering curiosity, not just compliance. Which means an openness to questions that they may ask. There are many people in your classrooms that are like me when I was young and going to school, that asked the question, why? And I was told to just keep quiet and get on with it. When students ask you why, what is your answer? Is it just learn it, this is the way it is? Or do you think, what that curious mind, how do I nurture this curiosity? How do I turn it into something positive? Because our role is to help students to learn how to think, not just what to think. That is the way that we will position our children, who are the leaders of tomorrow, for a fast-changing world. We must be able to create classrooms that are inclusive, that are interactive, but more than that, that are inspiring. I like what Dr. Wani said when she was giving this. She says, you know what, upon all the benefits of AI, can it stimulate that excitement? When you cheer on a student that perhaps has been slow to catch something and one day gets it, doesn't speak up, and one day raises their hand. AI can't do that, can't sense that. That is the role of educators. Because the best teachers are not just transmitters of knowledge, you are builders of confidence. And what you do can knock the confidence. My daughter had a teacher in primary school, in her early years of primary school, probably primary 1 or primary 2, a math teacher, who, if they didn't get them right, we hit them with a ruler on their knuckle. She was petrified of going to school, more petrified of maths. Till today, by her own admission, she's hopeless at maths. Cultivators of courage. But for tutors to do that, because I do believe that I'm speaking to a room, or perhaps there are other people in this room that are beyond educators, that could be policymakers, owners of schools, proprietors, and so on and so forth. We can't expect this much from our teachers if we don't invest in our teachers. We can't expect them to do magic. We must invest. I've made the call to teachers to invest in yourselves, in your own professional development. But then they need access to tools and resources, support networks such as this TTN, and peer learning, and more importantly, fair pay and recognition. Because when we build up our teachers, I believe that we will build up the entire nation. Even with all the dazzling tools of technology, education is still at its core a human endeavor. At its core, it's a human endeavor. Technology can deliver content. The other things, a teacher who notices a quiet child struggling. I once saw a clip of, this was not here, I think it was the States, one of those videos, of a teacher who stood at the door every day and welcomed the children with a hug. So I know some of you may have seen that. Set the tone for these children to feel welcome. Especially in our country, Nigeria, children come for backgrounds that are not ideal, homes that are dysfunctional. The classroom should be a safe place where they feel welcome, where they feel seen, and where they feel heard. AI can't do that. These little things, recognizing the child, hugging, identifying, listening, the small moments, but they shape lives. AI can enhance learning, but it can't love a child. It can't model integrity, which Dr. Wani spoke about. And more importantly, it can't inspire hope. That is the role of educators. Now, to reach the vision of Education 2030, I think we need a new kind of thinking. Perhaps, I couldn't think of how to call it, so I thought maybe a new social contract, not a formal contract. One, for us as educators, that says that every child is valuable and deserves quality education. Another, for others in the room or who may be listening, to recognize that teachers are not just workers. Teachers are leaders. We're professionals. We're mentors. We're not just workers. And the role is of critical importance. And perhaps the recognition of that role may translate into fairer pay and perhaps more adequate compensation models that recognize the critical importance of the roles. And curriculum must reflect not just global trends, but local realities. I believe that also in the opening address, we alluded to that. There was some reference to the ethical use of AI. I do believe that AI is here to stay. I do not believe some schools have banned the use of AI to say you can't use it for, rather than that, why don't we teach our learners the responsible use of AI? It's here to stay. It's not going away. And whenever I come across any school leader or so to say they've banned the use of AI, I say, but don't you use AI? I do. I use AI. I wrote my speech, I copied and pasted it there, and said, please make it into a form that's engaging. I used it. I wrote it, and I said, you know what? It's a bit too formal. There were suggestions. Why don't you try asking some questions? Why don't you add some personal anecdotes? Why don't you do that? If I can do that, why should we say people, no, don't use it for assignment? Instead, how do we teach the responsible use of AI? That does not take away the reflection and the thinking ability. But you see, it's all interconnected. Because if we teach and we expect our our learners to learn by rote, and the way we evaluate these students is by exams in which they have to memorize and put these things out, then obviously we're not helping. But the challenge, as I say to the tutors in my school, the challenge is a lot more work for us, the teachers, because you have to think of how do I evaluate the learning of this person in creative ways that is not about memorizing. It's a challenge. How do I know that this person has learned? What is the outcome of all I've done this? So really, and in our own local realities, we need to teach the responsible use of AI, which is why our values come in. Our cultural values come in. Those things that, in the past that we used to learn. Yeah, your brother's keeper, don't cheat, don't lie, all of this there. We need to bring those into the classroom when we're teaching about AI or when we're using AI tools. Because one of my favorite quotes, and I'm sure maybe anyone who has heard me speak before, it's my favorite quote about education, is by Theodore Roosevelt, one-time president of America, who said, if you educate a man in knowledge but not in values, you have created a menace to society. Because what has happened is that we've given them all these tools, but we have not taught them the responsible use. They can use these tools with the sophistication that exists today. They're digital natives and create mayhem and chaos. Example, Yahoo Boys. How do you use this to create scams? Because those values are missing. Education is not a cost. It is an investment in our collective future. And we can look at other countries and how they've used artificial intelligence or technology, not to copy, but to adapt. Rwanda, for instance, has equipped teachers with digital tablets, even in rural areas. India uses WhatsApp groups to reach learners, especially in remote areas. Finland blends autonomy with deep teacher preparation and trust. What will our Nigerian model look like? I hope that this conference and the engagements today and the conversations we will hear, listen to, will help us to define with wisdom, with courage, but also with urgency. We can't be left behind. Our learners can't be left behind. So to truly prepare for Education 2030, we need more than tools. We need a mindset shift. From fear of technology, some of us are afraid of technology, especially if we're digital immigrants. We didn't grow up. But the people in our classrooms today are digital natives. They know more about technology than us, so somehow we feel threatened. So let's move from fear of technology to curiosity. Adaptive learning. Let's move from competition to collaboration. How can I work with others? Let's move from scarcity to innovation. We don't have. That teacher with a cardboard computer printout was innovating for the good of the students. Let's move from waiting for permission to taking initiative, because as educators, we ourselves must be lifelong learners. We must be comfortable with uncertainty, and we must be skilled in digital tools. But more importantly, as Dr. Wani said, in empathy, in communication, and in leadership, we must model the behavior that we want our learners to adopt. My friends, Education 2030 is not just a target. It's not just let's jump on board. Let's do what others are doing. It calls for us to reimagine education in Nigeria, education in our classrooms. It's a call to responsibility. It's also a call to courage. Let's reimagine classrooms, not just as, for lack of a better word, factories for exams, but as rooms or workshops of possibility. And let us nurture every child, not just for today's test, but for tomorrow's challenges. You know, I see my role as an educator not just as shaping students, but really that we're shaping the future of our nation, Nigeria. And I believe that teachers are the bridge between the Nigeria we have and the Nigeria we imagine. So let's walk that bridge together. Thank you very much for your attention.